improve. I'm trying to kind of learn in different ways. But many of you will be ahead of me in terms of social media, gaming, and all the rest of it. So the only thing I can really do now is to give you some guidance on what I think works in terms of communication. So this is the guidance that has worked for me in 10 years of making television, that I think is generic, it's basic about the communication process. So here we go. Number one, forget the facts. This is a problem for us. We sit in laboratories and teaching rooms learning facts. We get examined on facts. And we kind of then assume that those facts are important to tell people, ordinary people. But actually, for ordinary people, facts aren't very important or very interesting. In fact, you know this, because most of the facts you're learning probably aren't very interesting. What is far more interesting is stories that go with those facts. The narrative, the stories, are really interesting. And of course, what I'm not saying is facts don't matter at all. It's much more important to create a story and then put the key facts in. Then people remember the facts. This quote is from a paper by two people working on climate change. It's in the Physics Today, talking about how to communicate climate change. And they say, try to craft messages that are not only simple but memorable, repeat them often, make more effective use of imagery, metaphor, and narrative, so story. Well, in short, be a better storyteller, lead with what you know and let your passion show. Now that bit about passion showing is again not something we tell you is important as a scientist, but it's crucial as a communicator, is you, and I'll come back to that. The second thing you need to do is to dumb down. Now, dumb down gets used as this kind of negative thing that says anything in the public domain is such a simplification that it's not accurate. But as this quote from Stevie Schneider as a climate scientist says, is unless you do simplify, you're not going to get a message across. And the way to look at it is to think that taking a complicated idea, being able to break it down to its bare elements, and then build it up in different ways for different audiences, it's a really complicated skill. It's a graduate level skill. So, you know, I hear lots of academics talking about television dumbed down. I hear very few academics saying, coming out of a master's class, and then to say, oh, I'm off to dumb down with the first years. And yet they simplify. They have a different language, they have different expectations. So the public is just a step beyond that same process. And the reason I have this up here is because the green triangle is the scientific method. It's the way we learn science. We come in and we learn lots about a subject, we learn more and more, and then we gradually drill into it more, and we start to get some data maybe for your project, your research project, and you analyze that data and you come out with a conclusion, and then you want to communicate that conclusion. The problem is, the way the public see it is exactly the opposite way around. They start on that sharp end, and the very first question they'll ask you is, what has this got to do with me? Why is this relevant to me? And if you cannot answer that one question, you don't go anywhere else. They don't have time for you to tell them for all the detail. But if you can answer that one question, you can draw them gradually more and more into the detail of what you do. But you have to flip the whole way you've been trained in university. Now, the key thing is, this still works in academic environments, so it's perfectly valid. It's just good for talking to scientists. But that is what you need for the public. So it's a whole different way to think. The other aspect is that it's about people. This is a quote from a paper I wrote with a journalist, but it's his words. I think it's just fantastic. He says, it's a fact often overlooked by scientists that most other people are mostly interested in other people. And they're mostly not interested in anything else. That fact that scientists are more interested than average in things and ideas marks them out, marks me out, marks you out as mentally unusual. There's a reason why people sit on the bus reading OK magazine or the gossip column. Because they're interested in people. That's a fundamental human aspect. The trouble with geology is it doesn't have too many people in it. Well, it kind of does. mean, it doesn't have it if you go back to the Devonian or something like that in terms of fossils, but there often are lots of people. These are two wildcat oil drills in Pennsylvania. Just look at them. They are interesting. You want to know more about that. The other aspect that flows from that is it's about you. Now again, in the scientific process, you as an individual don't exist. The investigator doesn't exist. It's objective science. The data just gets collected and analysed. It doesn't really matter who you are. And that might work for science, but it's lousy for communication. The key thing is that you are the gateway into your science, because you're mentally unusual. Think about what you do as geologists. You go to some far place, you climb a mountain, you take a hammer, you smack a rock off, you bring it back to the laboratory, you crush it, and you send it through a machine, and out pops a number. That's not normal. That isn't very normal. But it does make you very unusual as to why you do that. So I think one of the things is realizing, and some people won't like this and some people will, that you are actually the thing that opens up the science. That people might not be interested in the science, but they might be interested enough in you for you to do something. Now in television, that's one of the reasons why in the programs I make as a presenter, they spend the presenter doing lots of things that look very unusual. And the reason for that is to make you like me. Because if you like me, you'll follow my story, what I'm telling you. If you don't like me, you'll turn off immediately. So it's really important for all presenter-led programs that the presenter is someone who you feel you could go on a journey with. So I'm going to give you a little clip that shows you that. We'll see if we can get sound. It's kind of, yeah, let's see. No. That's fine. It's quite funny, anyway.
That's it.
So let me explain then. This is an alligator farm in Colorado, not the place you expect to see alligators. And we're actually looking at the first cruritarsons, which are the kind of early reptiles here. And so to explain this, because we don't have a modern equivalent, the BBC decided to put me to find a modern alligator and to mess around with a modern alligator. And this guy had just asked me to do this, to climb on to hold this alligator down. I'll talk through what it is. And then he walks away. just wanders off. And I didn't know this was going to happen, so I'm a little bit confused, because I was told that I wasn't allowed to go near the alligator, and here I am. And I'm very, very nervous. And this guy's now about to tell me that alligators have been told that Scottish people taste of chicken. So I'm more and more worried now. That's a joke. So that whole sequence is a joke. It's just a complete joke for 1.5 minutes. Because the story that's going to happen afterwards talks about a little intricacy of evolution that people might not be interested in. But if you present them with this beforehand, they get interested and excited, and then they'll watch the next one. And it's about the rhythm of something. But the point is that that's what a presenter of science can do. They can carry people through it. And the other one is the other lesson is tackle contentious subjects. We sometimes worry that we shouldn't tackle this as peak oil or fracking or something to do with maybe creationism, because we don't want to upset people. But actually, those contentious, controversial aspects are the one thing they're interested in. So don't ignore it, tackle it, but then lead them off into your area as a result. So tackle some of those things that the public are actually interested in. Now, why have I got this? Oh, yes. Oh, no, forget that one. Whoops. Don't mind. Yeah. The reason, if you look around the staff, the reason that they got into geology, and probably the reason you did, is because we just loved this amazing planet. That something was triggered in us when we were young and we really wanted to study the planet. And then what happens though is as we analyse things in more detail and we put more and more detail into the research, we kind of often forget what it was we got into in the first place. And so there's a few times you need to just pull yourself out of the academic world and just think, this happens to be Nepal, northern Nepal. And just think what an amazing planet we live in. And just try to capture that. There's a nice phrase here from this journalist, writer John McPhee, where he talks about the gaps exist between the facts are the geopoetry. And I think what you should be doing when you're communicating is trying to connect to some of that geopoetry rather than to the facts, because that'll convey much more to other people. Another clip, and this one doesn't really matter about sound, it should work, because it is the most amazing place. So that is a stupendous place, and the point is there are places in the world where these kind of things are. That is just amazing geology, but this place. That's gypsum. That is one of the simplest minerals on the planet. And yet, of course, so it's not the mineral that's interesting, it's what it looks like, what it does, what it creates. So the last, final one is that you need to entertain. And the reason you need to entertain is because when you do science communication, to the public especially, you're not in the academic world. You've actually kind of stepped out of the academic world into the entertainment industry. So people talk about my programs and they say, oh, it's very educational. That's fine. But actually, if I want people educated, I want them in classrooms like this. When they come in front of television and things like that, to allow them to take an hour out of their life, or half an hour, or whatever it is, or even 10 minutes to watch a YouTube, then they need to be entertained. That's our job as communicators, is to entertain. This long quote just basically says, folks, if you're doing science communication, you've just entered the entertainment industry. And that's a really important thing. And again, it's not something that sits necessarily very well with science. But some people find it uncomfortable. So this is the last clip, and I just ask you to think, is this something that a serious academic should be doing?
The discovery of Africa's deepest origins started with Livingston's fateful expedition 150 years ago.
So notice we're in storytelling. We'll tell the story of an explorer.
By a strange sight. A huge curtain of mist rising up from the river ahead, accompanied by a steadily increasing roar. Leading his team behind for fear of putting them in danger, the explorer continued his journey on. Only to find his way blocked by the most impenetrable of all obstacles. Known to the locals as Ozion, the smoke that thunders. We of course know it as the Victoria Falls. And the ultimate way to experience the falls involves getting your feet wet.
Are you sure he's not Australian?
While the water around me cascades down more than 100 metres to the river below, this pool forms a hidden sanctuary.
So, you should all do that. You should all do that. You can go to Africa in September. The Zambezi River is very low, and you can do that. Anyone can do that. You don't have to be a professor or a television presenter. When we were there filming, there was a bunch of tourists, 18-year-olds from America, that were doing exactly that. In fact, they were standing on the edge and backflipping. It's much more dangerous than I was doing. But you see what I mean? You need to be entertaining, and so if you wanted your message across, that was actually about the breakup of Pangaea and large igneous provinces, plateau basalts, which is quite it's a hard concept to explain, so it needs to be lightened up, and that's what it's the job to do. So this is oh no, we don't want that again. Do you remember this slide at the start? Those boring rocks. These are layers of mudstone, I was saying, but that layer there is 251 million years. That is the end Permian extinction. That is a time when, whatever, 99% of life, whatever you calculate, nearly gets wiped out. Nothing bigger than a rodent gets through that barrier. So life nearly stops on the planet at that point. In fact, that's why these muds have got nothing in them, because the oceans are anoxic and they're dying. So the rocks are the most boring rocks in the world, but the story is the most incredible, one of the most incredible stories the planet has. And that's the point, is it's not about stones, it's about stories. What we do in science communication, geoscience communications, we tell stories about the Earth. Thank you very much.
In the name of the students, please.
Aha!
UFRJ.
Oh, look at this hat. That looks amazing. Thank you. I must put it on. So
Remember your chemistry little rock. Don't worry.
you want it. Cheers. Thank you very much. Thank you.